Adam Parkhomenko, great to see you, my brother. It's been a while. Hope all is well. Unfortunately, I don't have to tell you, the world is going crazy. No time, got to jump right into it. I want to start with the facts before the spin. 2 people are murdered in a horrific family tragedy. Talking, of course, about Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner. And within hours, our president, Donald J. Trump, interjects politics right into it. When you first saw his comments, what immediately stood out to you?
I mean, it's pure evil. And I've known Rob and Michelle for years. I actually did an interview yesterday with The Hill because Rob had reached out to me in the summer of 2020 because he saw these viral Midas Touch videos that were created by Brett, and he loved them. As somebody who was born in 1985 and grew up watching the 1986 classic Stand By Me, the fact that this guy had reached out, online, which was very normal at the time during COVID, but wanted to lift stuff up and also just offer insight from him and Michelle. It's somebody who I considered a friend, and I was so disgusted to see what Donald Trump said yesterday, and it's very disappointing. And the fact that, there was a Fox News panel where you had all 5 on the panel say and agree, probably for the first time ever, that this was beneath the presidency. You have to wonder what over the last 11 months did they think was above the presidency?
I mean, it's a good point, because he didn't just comment. He suggested that Rob Reiner's political criticism somehow led to this violence, somehow led to this brutal murder. From your experience, how dangerous is it when a president even implies blame without having any evidence at all?
It's incredibly dangerous. And, I know we'll probably talk about this and other stuff here for the segment as it relates to the fact that, you've got people like Donald Trump and Kash Patel in real time during active shooter situations coming out with information. But it's the same thing here. I think nothing rattles Donald Trump more than someone who doesn't need him. And Rob Reiner told the truth, and Trump responded exactly like the man who, knows it landed. This wasn't some type of rebuttal. It was literally, you had and by the way, I watched the video 2 or 3 times just to make sure I wasn't seeing something yesterday. You had a guy who was going after a dead man while referring to himself in third person. I mean, that's just crazy.
I mean, when I first saw the comment that was posted on his Truth Social post, I actually thought that it was an AI dupe. There was no way in the world that the man who I knew better than any human being should know another human being would actually be even this callous. Now, Trump has said many, many things. He's called John McCain wasn't a war hero. I like people who aren't captured. He turned around and he disrespected other veterans, and so on. He's made quite a few horrific comments. When Paul Pelosi was attacked and beaten in the head with a hammer, he referred to maybe the fact he was in his underwear and another man was there in order to imply something. He does say things, but this one, I actually had to go back and I had to reread it and do research to ensure that it wasn't some AI spoof that was going to get me into trouble for promoting something that I found to be so hurtful, so utterly cruel, with a complete and total lack of empathy. And then all of a sudden I started seeing it posted on the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, on ABC, NBC, CNN, you name it. It literally exploded everywhere because of its horrific nature. What did you think the first time you saw that?
Yeah, to be honest, I felt the same way, because I started getting a bunch of text messages from folks where it was coming in, but a lot of times you receive it in the form of a screenshot, right? And there's no time or date. It's a different shape. The text size is different. And I was like, this can't be real. And then I saw that it was. And shortly after, you started seeing I mean, people along the likes of Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene and others coming out responding that this is not acceptable. And not only is it astonishing, but it's just we are living in this. I don't think anybody can say or do the type of stuff that Donald Trump does after Donald Trump is gone. I feel like we're in a place right now where our country is going to go through what it's going through right now, because that sometimes that's the way history is. We have to go through these shitty periods in order to get to a place where this never happens again. But the fact that he went this low, I guess it's not surprising, but also I think it feeds into a lot of the decline that we've been seeing in the recent weeks and months. And it's sad because, Rob Reiner and Michelle have a incredible legacy. They've done, I thought this guy probably had, 72 plus hours in a day, because somehow he managed to do all the incredible work and leave us with all this incredible work that we'll look at for years and years and years. And many of us will be watching over the holidays. I was watching Stand By Me last night.
Sure.
At the same time,
movie.
his leg, yeah. And, again, it's almost hard to watch now, because for those that know the ending of it and what just happened, it makes it that much harder. But we are now in a position where somebody like all of the incredible work that Rob Reiner did over the years is just full of bullshit, chaos, and confusion coming from the right, where they continue just to sow absolute chaos, and other countries doing the same thing, and take away what should be just an incredible legacy of somebody who we should have had for so many more years.
See, I don't mind the fact that Trump didn't like Rob Reiner because Rob Reiner was critical of him. I get that. I think every single one of my listeners actually gets that. Why would you like somebody who's critical of you, whether you deserve it or not, right? People don't see their own errors, right? And so they just want you to accept them for whatever it is that they say. But this one went even lower, as you said. It reached, when in my fraternity, we used to say to our pledges that you're lower than whale shit at the bottom of the ocean, but second to a brother, right? That's kind of like what went through my mind. I don't know why. It's like a statement that I haven't thought of or heard of since 1984 when I was a pledge. You, of course, were one. You're still in diapers, right? 1984. I mean, all of a sudden it popped into my head. And I'm saying to myself, I'm not sure that there's a way to even go lower. But I ascribe to what you're saying. Nobody else other than Trump can get away with it. I was at an event, Dan Abrams Mediaite event. It was a bipartisan event. I mean, guys like Scott Jennings was there. So was Ari Melber. So was
Dan Abrams has been a great authoritative legal expert for years and years. I mean, he's a good guy.
Yeah, great guy. It was a great event. It was completely bipartisan. Yeah, both sides. Mika, Joe, were there. I mean, there was a lot of folks on both sides. The topic of conversation that could not escape anybody's mouth, especially when I walked in, was, what do you think he was thinking? Why do you think he did what he did? Even for him, this doesn't make any sense. Talking about Trump derangement syndrome before you have any idea what this case was even about.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, if you think back to when Charlie Kirk was murdered, which was a political piece, and here we're dealing with what should be a non-political piece. The number of Democrats, not to make this political, but that stepped up and were presidential, whether it was former presidents, whether it was former candidates, and so forth. I mean,
whether it was Rob Reiner,
yeah,
who himself Rob did that.
Right. And that's a video that I posted. Rob Reiner, was on the right side of the response when it came to the Charlie Kirk murder. And by the right side, I mean the right side of history. And it's truly just astonishing and weird. What we should have been discussing is how tragic this was, thinking of the family and talking about mental health issues and drug issues and things like that. And because based on, the reports that have come out, not only do we know that Rob loved his son and as did Michelle, but they had been doing anything and everything they could to try to help him over the years. And when you think of a family with so many connections and resources and things like that, if even they are struggling to help their son, just think of folks who don't have any of that, right? And it was a moment to talk about what is a serious issue that's happening all over the country and getting even worse because of Donald Trump. I mean, if you look at farmers, and we're talking about cattle and the soybean issues and that kind of stuff, a lot of people are talking about farms being foreclosed and going under. That's not just because farmers are not able to keep up under Trump. It's because many of them are committing suicide right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. But law enforcement came straight out and they made it clear as soon as they were able to release the information, made it crystal clear that this was a family matter involving the Reiner's son, Nick, not about ideology, had nothing to do with politics. What does it say to you about Trump's instincts that he ignored that reality entirely?
Well, I think part of it is he's so used to, and I know we'll get to this later in terms of the Vanity Fair piece, but I think we have the same insight that better than anybody else in terms of who he is and how he operates. And I think that he loves humiliating people. He loves to see people go through terrible things, even if they are his own family. The only person he doesn't want to see is himself humiliated. So he doesn't care what the facts are. It goes back to the point that you made, right? It's all about what Rob Reiner had said about him previously, which if we're talking about, Charlie Kirk, right? First Amendment, people should be able to say this kind of stuff. You are entitled to your own opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. And Rob Reiner shared his opinion, which, by the way, was fact-based. And Donald Trump just decided to say whatever the hell he wanted, and is not presidential at all, right? We know that. But what we do know is that over the course of this year, where this is his first year back in office, he had his physical, and there's a number of other odd things that have happened since then. There's been multiple trips over to the hospital. There's an MRI where he's on a plane and he can't even say, he doesn't even know what an MRI is, or maybe you think that he does. And he's just, but it's almost just like he's in full decline, right? The fact that he can't even say whether or not, all I know is it wasn't part of my head. And then continues to talk about these, can you name a giraffe test? And this is not I would hope that at some point, maybe this is finally the administration that we would see the 25th Amendment.
Yeah, but the question then really becomes, you said, Donald likes to humiliate people. That's true. I've seen it up close. I've been involved. How do you humiliate a dead person? You
Exactly.
don't. And that's the point that I'm trying to make here, because none of this makes any sense. And worse than the fact that none of this makes any sense is that there's not a single Michael Cohen around him at this moment, whether it's the Susie Wiles, whether it's, his own kids, whether it's, Lutnick or Besant or Smiling Bob Bassett or Ted Cruz or any of them. There's not a single person or Marco Rubio or Pete Hegseth, not a single person turned around and said to him, as like I would say to you, Adam, why don't you maybe park that email in your notes section and maybe we'll get back to it at another time, right? When it's probably less current, maybe not so toxic.
As I like to refer to it,
do well to you.
Consider it tweeted, right? You put it in the drafts and consider it tweeted. Yeah, I mean, again, this was I think it was a 60-second clip that I saw yesterday. He was calling a dead man deranged while referring to himself in third person. And this is a guy who seems to learn certain things that have happened that are humiliating to him or embarrassing to him from people like Caitlin Collins asking the question for the first time, because it's very clear that nobody around him is sharing anything bad with him.
Yeah, I mean, it's gross. So let me ask you this, because what struck many people is that this time, as you were saying before, Republicans did not circle the wagon. Now, some did, We watched as MAGA Mike Johnson, that feckless little fucknut, right, refused to answer. I'm talking about healthcare. We're working on healthcare right now, and I'm not here to answer, every question about what the president says from time to time. Right now, I have bigger issues. Okay, probably right about that. But these Republicans, they actually went out, many of them, and I mean many, and admonished him. How rare is it today, in today's GOP, to see figures literally publicly draw a line in the sand like this?
It's incredibly rare. These are not the days of Senator John McCain and Senator Fred Thompson and people, Craig Thomas from Wyoming, like senators that people had heard of and senators that people had never heard of that were there to work. These aren't the days of Hillary Clinton and Lindsey Graham doing Bible study weekly together. When I first started working with her, that's what they did. So, you mentioned at the start, the Dan Abrams party hosted by Mediaite. Well, Mediaite was the one that had flagged this Fox News panel where 5 of them were all on the same page, calling this unacceptable and beneath the presidency. And while I think there are so many other things, countless, right, that he has done and continues to do that are beneath the presidency, this seemed to be that moment and that line in the sand for many where it was a step too far. And I think when you think about the voters, right? This is somebody, Rob Reiner, has just been so incredibly successful, not just in terms of movies that people watch over and over again, but movies that childhood stars came out of, that are actors and actresses that we all watch now, and had one-liners that they can never forget. And this doesn't, people don't look at him on the political spectrum. He may have been vocal online in some interviews, but when you're talking about, Northwest Georgia, Rob Reiner, and his family name is a household name.
Yeah. I want to talk specifics, for example, because I can go through many, but there were a couple that sort of stuck out to me. You had Senator John Kennedy, and I cannot believe that I'm going to actually compliment this fucking asshole because, I think he's an asshole. I really, truly do. And I just think he's fucking incompetent. But he made a comment that I was aghast that he actually would say something that is
the
not.
Moment you said him, I'm just like,
right, yep. That you're ready to choke. He turned around and he said that a wise man remains silent. And they asked him why. He said, because he is wise. He actually turned around and said, this should not be politicized. When someone like John Kennedy speaks up, what does it tell you about how far Trump may have actually gone with this post?
I think it says everything. And you've got a legal background, the old line, how did they catch the fish? Well, he opened his mouth. It goes back to your other comments. Hey, this guy just can't help himself. But when you've got someone like Senator Kennedy, by the way, many times, as you know, and we've got, it's like Senator Tom Tillis, right? Until there's a retirement, you don't start to hear these people talk the way they should be talking, all right? And all of a sudden in North Carolina, you got this retirement, and Tillis sounds like a normal person who is actually trying to get things done and is willing to be critical of the president, because despite the fact that still probably causes security issues for him and his family, he doesn't have to worry about that anymore. Senator Kennedy saying that, I think says it all. I mean, that's a perfect example, right? I'd love to say that Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that says it all, but the reality is that I think, that she's probably taking advantage of some of the, not on this. It's probably a sincere response with everything going on. I think she was sincere in the Epstein stuff, but I do think that she's looking ahead, to a potential presidential run with this sort of civil war that's taking place within the party. But when you have Senator Kennedy, I think he's probably one of the better bellwethers in terms of Donald Trump has crossed a new line, which is interesting. And I think, again, it's a place that we need to get to in this country, because it was just a few weeks ago that Donald Trump was talking about hanging public officials. And one of my first thoughts was, there's no oversight in the Supreme Court, right? No one investigates them and so forth, but they are still public officials. At what point does someone like the Supreme Court take a look at this crazy stuff that Donald Trump is saying and say, hey, they might be the next Mike Pence, right? They might be the next Mark Kelly. And
Sure.
I hope that all of this, including the legacy that is Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer, is starting to bring some of this to fruition.
So I actually hate that, oh, the legacy taken too early. Taken too early from us, these two very good people, right? Good for no reason. And yes, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who only over the course of the last couple of months, I believe she is thinking about running for senator, if I'm not mistaken, at the moment, maybe probably looking at a presidential race. Though I think she herself would acknowledge that she has like a 0% chance of even getting the Republican nomination, let alone ever convincing all of America, or at least the plurality of America, that she's the one that we want leading our country.
But the scary thing, Michael, is that she, and I know she crapped on the Senate, so I don't think she's going to run for that. But the scary thing is I thought for sure when she went on The View, there would be some really tough questions, because she really, minus the Epstein, the pivot had been very new, and they really sort of glorified her.
Yeah, glorify all you want. There's not a chance in the world. There's too much dirt. There's too much stupid shit that she had said year after year after year. Yeah. Too much praise of Trump.
Well, hopefully she falls in that column that this is never going to happen again.
Yeah. This time of year, your feed never quits. Holiday headlines, family debates, group texts that you didn't ask for. It's relentless. And honestly, some days you just deserve a ceasefire. And that's why I'm genuinely excited about IndaCloud. IndaCloud is your online cannabis dispensary. Gummies, curated flower, pre-rolls, and now 0 sugar, 0 calorie THC sodas. All federally legal, DEA certified, lab tested, shipped discreet. Because some headlines deserve to be ignored, and some days deserve bubbles. First time I tried IndaCloud, I realized silence really is the best headline. One gummy later, the news ticker in my brain, it finally took the night off. Now, I add the THC soda to the mix. Same calm, but faster reporting. Holiday debate burnout, information overload meltdown, handled. I mean, they've got everything you need. Gummies for when relatives start debating taxes again. Sodas for muting the endless war on Christmas discourse. And pre-rolls for when you just can't anymore. And $70 ounces, IndaCloud calls that fiscal responsibility. I call it sanity. I mean, this is how adults log off mindfully and maybe with a little fizz. So if you're 21 or older, go right now to indacloud.co and use code Cohen for 25% off plus free shipping. That's IndaCloud, INDACLOUD.co, code Cohen. Get 25% off, free shipping, and one less headline in your head. Enjoy responsibly, and thanks to IndaCloud for sponsoring today's show. I mean, but even when Marjorie Taylor Greene says that this is too much, you really have to kind of acknowledge that is too much. But here's just even one more.
Hey, wait, hold on. Can I add one thing to your Marjorie Taylor Greene thing that I think is interesting? So yesterday she announced that she got engaged, right, to this reporter who is still in the White House and still asking Donald Trump these questions. To me, when you talk about Senator Kennedy and people that are starting to willing to push back, I thought the fact that engagement happened, not just happened, that's a personal thing, but that it was public, and that again, I'm not a fan of either, but that reporter was willing to move forward and do that and not give a shit what's going to happen in the White House to him and so forth, shows that more and more, inch by inch, people are willing to do what Senator Kennedy did.
Well, let's hope, right? But Thomas Massie also pushed back. He literally called the comments wrong and unnecessary. The question actually regarding Thomas Massie, very similar to the Marjorie Taylor Greene or even John Kennedy. You think this is about moral clarity or about Republicans sensing political danger in Trump's reflexes?
It's a good question, because I went back and I've looked at a couple different recent, and some of them are older videos about Congressman Massie, specifically leading up to the work that he was doing with Ro Khanna on Epstein. And, one of the things he said, without using, he didn't curse, but he basically said, I don't give an F what they do if they want to come for me. I am content being done in Congress. And he's like, they can cut me off on all fronts. He said, my home is energy sufficient, food sufficient. We have everything we need where, if they cut everything off, we can still be sustainable. So I think he's at a point where, I know he lost I never thought I'd be lifting up Massey, but, he lost his wife not too long ago and has since remarried. And I think that he is, one of these sort of folks that doesn't care the way that he goes out at this point. And he's thinking more, from what I can tell, about the country and how he's going to be remembered.
Well, let's hope. On that sort of point, do you see these admonishments by the various different Republicans as genuine concern? Because I truly don't. I think that so many of them are so fucking devoid of empathy that they think that this sort of MAGA style meanness is going to keep them in power. Because I do believe for the bulk of them, it's about self-preservation, whereby these members are realizing that even the public, their constituents, regardless of how cruel that they can be, how racist, sexist, misogynistic, xenophobic, homophobic, transphobic, Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, it doesn't matter. Even the public has limits, and that they have limits even when it comes to Trump.
I hope so. But the thing is that I think there's probably a number of things at play, and it's probably case by case basis, right? Like someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's currently feuding with Donald Trump, it's probably to be expected she's going to say what she's going to say. But, I think there's two things that Republicans have to look at right now. And one is the fact that in all of these special elections that have taken place this year, and it may be more than this by now, but as of a week or two ago, in terms of actual flips, seats up and down the ballot, Democrats had flipped 25 seats, Republicans had flipped 0. That's separate from any seats that they would have retained in a special election. If you're looking at the margins, like for instance in Miami, in that mayor's race, I mean, there were areas within Miami after having a Republican as mayor for 28 years where the Democrat outperformed Kamala Harris by 42 points. You've got statewide electeds that were elected in Georgia on the affordability and electrical issue. So I think that if you've got districts that are swinging as much as they are, many of these Republicans in Congress, it's a much slimmer margin than 10 points. It could be 5 points. It could be, plus Trump, 7. And the reason that I point that out is because if you go back to 2018 and beyond with Nancy Pelosi, one of the things that she always accepted is that there are going to be Democrats out there talking shit about her, attacking her, running for re-election, running for the first time. And, 99% of the time, they're going to vote with her when they get to Congress. And she wasn't out there attacking them. They didn't live in fear of saying something that might offend her. She wanted them to be themselves, authentic, and run. And that's something that Donald Trump just can't do. Somebody could criticize her and say something and throw her under the bus, and she wasn't tweeting out about them or attacking them. She was hoping that they were going to win in November. And I think that is something that Republicans are looking at right now, right? If they're going to run for re-election, then it comes down to their numbers, but they're also determining whether or not, they're going to put their lives at risk running for that seat. So I say that because I think you'll probably see a number of retirements coming out of this latest one, which is Marjorie Taylor Greene on January 5th.
I agree with you. Now, let's just zoom out for a second. Let's take this to that 35,000 feet. What does this episode tell us about Trump's inability, or more, his refusal to show basic empathy, even when the moment demands restraint?
It's a great question. I just don't think he has it. I mean, you tell me, you've known him for a lot longer, but you just don't see it. And when you do, it comes across as somebody who is the same guy that's going into those, beauty pageants and hanging out and kind of dancing around Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, I want to, maybe there are moments where, something there is real, but even in those moments where he's like, where's Erica? Where's Erica? Grabs her and all that kind of stuff. It just comes across as like the typical icky Donald Trump, This is not somebody, this is a guy who called our soldiers, suckers and losers. This is a guy who crapped all over John McCain. This is a guy who literally, wants to bring Senator Mark Kelly back. I just don't see it there. I don't see it there.
Well, he wants to bring Mark Kelly back so that they could strip him of his title and his pension. It's not for good reason.
I just don't think a guy who buries his ex-wife on a golf course and gets a tax write-off has any empathy.
Well, that's a pretty good point. Look, this country has literally watched Trump respond to mass shootings. We all responded to those two horrific moments when his life was on the line. We all certainly showed empathy. I know I did. I remember watching on television as Charlie Kirk was executed.
That happened 60 seconds before I went live with Michael Popak.
Yeah. I mean, literally, I remember I was watching it live as this was taking place. And I remember just my heart sinking. And I believe that Americans feel the exact same way that I do, regardless of party affiliation. And I'm with you on the Rob Reiner scenario. Who doesn't remember him as the lovable meathead, right? Who doesn't remember him as, the father, the accountant in Wolf of Wall Street, right? To Jordan Belfort. Who doesn't remember him in Spinal Tap, right? Or, doesn't remember him as the director for one of the all-time favorite fucking movies, which is The Princess Bride, right? I mean, my favorite with, Andre the Giant or Enigma Montoya. I am looking for the man with 6 fingers, prepare to die. He killed my father. Oh, okay. How many times I hear that sort of quote? We all watched in various times Trump responding to these mass shootings, political violence, and death. How does this moment compare in tone and consequence?
First of all, hearing you talk about all those movies, I rewatched an old GMA interview with Rob Reiner. I mean, this was a very long one yesterday. And one of the things I had never really kind of taken a moment to think about until all of this is he made movies with real people, right? This wasn't like Alien or like a bunch of high-tech stuff. These were families. These were kids. These were people sitting around a dining room table. These were, real issues that affected all of us. You're going back to Stand By Me, and that line about, how many people have friends like they did when they were 12. I think that this has struck a new, this has affected people in a very different way. And you see that throughout the comments too. Interestingly, I was looking at YouTube at a couple thousand comments on one video, and there were so many people that, and these were, a lot of them were MAGA accounts that just said I didn't like the guy. And to be honest, and then here, a lot of them were saying, hearing his response for the first time because of what happened to the Charlie Kirk murder and knowing all of the good work he had done over the years, they know that he's a solid guy. So this to me almost reminds me of Putin going into Ukraine, thinking he could take the capital in 11 minutes with this, Cold War mentality and being so out of touch, right? Perceiving something as a military of 2 million people as opposed to 40 million people who didn't want to live under him. I think whether or not somebody should be reading the room on this issue, they shouldn't. But I think this was a big misstep, and Donald completely misjudged the way that America expects him to respond to a tragedy like this.
Which is shocking because he actually has really good instinct when it comes to this. A lot of times he says things that will anger people that will rile up his base and so on. Not this one. This isn't that. This wasn't that where even MAGA was going to go. And that's a real problem for them, especially because with all of the journalists coming at various different members of the inner sanctum of the White House, they were now incapable of walking Trump's words back. We saw Mike Johnson run away from it. I don't want to talk about it. And so on. You started seeing, people shut themselves out and away from any media, right, where they can be asked this question. Because they can't walk it back. No apology, no walking back, no recalibration. The question actually I really want to ask you is, what does that say about how insulated they are keeping Trump from, these sort of scenarios, from normal human reaction? How do you see that?
I think he's completely isolated from reality, and I think that they do that on purpose, right? And we've seen some of the Associated Press, Reuters photographers in the past that will capture these note cards where he's got a couple big bullet points that they clearly have given him, or some of them are in his Sharpie. You don't see that much anymore. What you see is a guy who's falling asleep as Oz is talking about people that are obese and diabetes and health issues, and we've seen him falling asleep multiple different times. Something is just off, and I think that we've heard how many times now that the president, quote unquote, is working very long hours based on the log of the Marines outside the door, and he's putting in 12-hour days, which, by the way, based on the federal minimum wage, I think would be like $82 or $87 a day. What he's doing in that period, God knows, but he does not, he doesn't seem all there.
Yeah, well, look, I don't know how many hours.
And just to go back to that point,
the fact that
Caitlin
he's watching
Collins,
the news doesn't necessarily mean he's working.
But I think you can see it in him, and there's been a couple of these moments, right? To go back, like, to the point earlier in the show, Caitlin Collins and others have asked him about things where he's so thrown off, right? And he's not prepared to answer it.
Right.
And it's like the Ghislaine Maxwell stuff. There was that moment in the Oval where he was asked about Maxwell, and he was like, I'm sorry, who? Oh, yeah. Are we still talking about her? Oh, I haven't even, this is not a guy. I don't believe that part. He's like playing that. I think that he just was not expecting to be asked about that because he doesn't know the latest story of the day that's out there on it.
And trust me, somebody got their ass kicked for that too. But I want to switch over for another topic that has sort of captured the world's attention. Because while all this shit, like with what's going on at Brown University, what's going on in terms of anti-Semitism around the country, what's going on, of course, with the Reiner murders and so on, all this is unfolding here at home. We're continuing to see strikes on these vessels in the Caribbean. And I want people just to know, in case somehow you don't know, which I'm sure you do, but those boats, those aluminum boats with like the twin Mercury outboard motors, or three, twin engine, outboard motors, in these 18 to 20 foot aluminum, vessels, they are being blown up with people in it under the guise that they are transporting fentanyl to this country. The claim is so ludicrous in and of itself, as we know that fentanyl comes from China, and the bulk of the fentanyl comes through our southern border via Mexico, not from Colombia, which is where we know cocaine comes from, which, by the way, the White House has now finally acknowledged, and that they've changed their tone, or Venezuela, right, which is generally where like pot comes from, which, by the way, crazy now, it happens to be legal. You could go walk down any street just about in the country and go buy yourself weed if that's what you're into. But even
yesterday, I think they were talking about changing that.
Yeah. But 3 more vessels, literally yesterday, while all this shit's going on, with all of the controversy around it, Pete, the schmuck Hegseth, decides that his Department of War must double down. We must continue forward. 3 more confirmed, blown up. 8 more additional people are dead. Why do you think that this barely broke through the noise?
I mean, that's a good question. This was, it's one of the reasons why probably so much doesn't break through anymore. This was a very bloody weekend, though. If this were any other administration, this would be a 5-alarm fire, right? Instead, it barely makes the crawl, as you're saying. And I think that one of the issues that we have is the facts keep changing. And I think an interesting thing that I've thought a lot about is that video, the congressional video that came out with the 6 members of Congress, some in the Senate, some in the House, one being Senator Mark Kelly. The timing of that, if you go back to some of the original, I guess the original hit was September 2nd, where they did the double hit and then they killed those 2. If you look at the lineup in terms of when that video came out, it suggests to me that a number of folks, whether it is current, former, DOD and others that are all in communication, we're passing on. There are orders coming out that are illegal and should not be happening, because right after that video came out, Donald Trump did everything that the video of Mark Kelly and others, he was calling for the public hanging and so forth. And then we learned what actually happened on September 2nd. And now all of a sudden the focus has largely moved to these sort of war crimes that are taking place, as opposed to that video that was in Congress. We're hearing a lot less about that now, except for the fact that DOJ, right, is trying to go after Mark Kelly. So I am hopeful that we're going to hear more about this, just because the White House lied, right? The Washington Post and CNN came out with what they did. The White House just straight up lied. Then we learned more of the truth. Hopefully, there'll be some hearings, but in a parallel to that, the clock is also ticking with the deadline to release these Epstein files. So I think that the 2 of these, as you said, I think that this latest, the boat strikes paired with the Epstein stuff, as you have said best, really does give off this sort of idea and look that Donald Trump is a scared, New York City rat that is cornered.
Well, I've never really seen him scared or concerned. I think the one concern he does have is the midterms. He does not want to become a lame duck president, which he knows if the House or the Senate, or God willing, both flip and become Democrat, he will be able to accomplish nothing, not with an executive order, not with the bullying of the judiciary, nothing. Well,
and what you're saying is such a good point. I don't think a lot of people have been thinking about it or talking about it. It's almost, if you go back to the first administration, right, where they didn't really know what they were doing, and then they lost Congress, right, and then they were just shit out of luck. Here, they came in, they knew exactly what they were going to do. By all accounts, he can't believe how much he's getting away with. But the reality is he's got a serious problem on the House side, maybe even on the Senate side. But on the House side, if he keeps acting the way he's acting, he could potentially lose the House sooner than the midterms. It only takes a few more Republicans to retire early. And whether or not Democrats win those seats, depending on what the states are, Georgia, for instance, Marjorie Taylor Greene's leaving, that seat is going to be vacant for at least probably 60 days. It's up to the governor of Georgia when that gets filled with a certain timeline. It could go longer. Yep. You could have whether or not Democrats want him as the leader, you could have a leader, Hakeem Jeffries, before November.
Yeah, well, let's hope it's not Hakeem Jeffries. But I want to turn around and I want to sort of introduce something that also happened. Susie Wiles, Chief of Staff. Susie Wiles did what most of us who were in Trump's orbit and protected him would have told her right off the bat, stupid move. She sat for an interview. There's no reason for any of these folks. I remember when Jared did it early on to take credit for winning Trump, the very first campaign, bad move. You ever tried launching a podcast with zero experience? Well, let me tell you, It's like being tossed into a cage match with a grizzly bear, blindfolded, wearing clown shoes. I mean, when I started Mea Culpa, I thought to myself, come on, how hard can this be? Well, script writing, logos, production schedules, ad deals, and don't even get me started on the tech setup. I mean, I felt like I was decoding the damn Matrix. If only I had Shopify when I launched this beast. Shopify is the platform behind millions of businesses across the globe, responsible for a whopping 10%, you hear me? 10% of all e-commerce in the United States. And my friends, that's not hype. That's a fact. From big names like Mattel and Gymshark to folks just getting their hustle off the ground, Shopify's got their back. I mean, you want a gorgeous online store? Shopify's got hundreds of sleek, ready-to-go templates that make you look like a design god. And AI tools? Yeah, they've got those too. Writing your product descriptions, jazzing up your images, maybe even making you sound smarter than you actually are. I mean, not naming names or anything, right? I mean, need a marketing squad? Shopify's built-in tools let you hit email, Instagram, TikTok, wherever your customers are scrolling or doom scrolling. And listen, Shopify handles it all. Inventory, returns, international shipping. I mean, they are the ride or die business partner that you never knew that you needed. So if you got a big idea or even a little one and you're ready to turn that dream into a reality, head over to shopify.com/Cohen. So if you want to see less carts being abandoned, it's time for you to head over to Shopify and sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Cohen. That's Shopify, SHOPIFY.com/Cohen. One more time, that's shopify.com/Cohen. All right, let me break character just enough to tell you something real. I spent a good chunk of my life running on adrenaline, bad decisions, late nights, and stress that you can't stretch out your spine. But here's the truth no one tells you. When your head hits the pillow, your brain, it doesn't magically shut up just because you ask nicely. And that changed when I got my Lisa Sapira Hybrid. I'm not being dramatic here. Believe me, I know drama. This mattress actually meets you where you are. It's supportive without feeling like a board. It's plush without swallowing you whole. I fall asleep faster. I stay asleep longer. And I wake up without feeling like I just lost a cage match with my own back. That, my friends, is not luxury. That is survival. Lisa doesn't do gimmicks. They design mattresses for how real people actually sleep. They're made right here in the USA, and they back it up with free shipping, easy returns, and a 120-night trial. 120 nights. And they put their money where their values are, by donating thousands of mattresses and helping to clean plastic out of our oceans. And to me, that matters. So here's the deal. And yes, this matters too. Right now, during Lisa's holiday sale, I want you to go to Leesa.com. That's LEESA.com and get 20% off mattresses with my promo code Cohen. That's Leesa.com. Again, LEESA.com, promo code Cohen. Support the show, support better sleep, and for once, wake up feeling like you actually won the night. Susie Wiles sits for this interview, Vanity Fair. Clearly, right, aimed at her, and now she's in damage control mode. Watching it, what felt most revealing to me was what she said, or more importantly, what she avoided entirely. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we put out a newsletter and we titled it Susie Spills the Beans. I am shocked. Not at the content.
By the way, I know. That's why I'm asking you. I read the article.
Okay, thanks. I'm shocked not at the content of the Vanity Fair piece or the New York Times piece, because I think it sort of confirms the hypothesis that we all had, which is not a hard conclusion to come to. It's a little. I mean, to go back to your point, it's shocking that she did this, and if she thinks that like a tweet is going to somehow clean this up, the the damage is done. But I'm very curious, again, going back to your point about Donald Trump being so isolated now. He's gonna, if there's, she's probably gonna want to be in the room for every single meeting that takes place for the next couple of months, because otherwise he'll get the full story of it, and I don't think he's gonna get it elsewhere.
Oh, no, he's already gotten it. You see, that's the whole thing. Why I say that her sitting for an interview was absolutely stupid. Somehow, for whatever reason, maybe she was having a moment of honesty and clarity. She said that his actions are that of like an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. All right. And she used the fact that her father was an alcoholic, that she understands that sort of rage, that uncontrollable rage that he has. Well, associating Donald Trump to the term alcoholic, one, I was shocked. He does not drink alcohol.
Doesn't drink, and also with what happened to his brother.
I've seen him hold a glass of champagne. I've seen him hold a glass of red wine. He'd take not even a sip. He would like touch his lips. He'd put it down and then walk away from it nonchalantly. But his brother passed of alcoholism. And to associate him to that, the things she said about J.D. Vance, the things she said about so many others, I thought was so telling, because that's what's going on, not just in today's administration, but it's followed from the very first administration, where the knives are out for everyone. Trust me, I know. In my book, Revenge, I talk about how the knives were out for me. And I wasn't even a government employee. I was his personal attorney. I was personal attorney to the president. But they didn't want me anywhere near the Oval Office, because people like Jared was concerned that I would have put a stop to his relationship to Mohammed bin Salman, which is purely for Jared's financial gain. And this is the way that they behave. It's all about not what you're doing for the country, but what it will ultimately do for you. Something that we're seeing, like even right now, from Kushner running with Steve Witkoff off to Berlin, Riyadh, Middle East, Israel. They're out there. They're lining up their next billion for their next project. That's all that they're doing at our expense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what you said is exactly right. The question is coming out of this Vanity Fair piece, what does Donald focus on out of it, right? Does he enjoy the fact that she said everything that she said about J.D. Vance, or does he get focused on one piece? It would be nice if he was able to take the control that he has over alcohol and use that same discipline when it comes to leading this country, and not, further dividing folks and just doing endless damage, whether that's the East Wing or other things like that. But I don't know. We'll probably hear more in the coming hours.
Oh, you could bet your bottom dollar on that. So look, as we're winding sort of the hour down, I want to talk to you about the elephant in the room, talking about the Epstein files. We're absolutely, even today, expecting a release, right? And I'm not talking about more photographs. I know we saw those 19. We saw the ones before. I don't believe any of those photos so far to date show any criminality by anyone. Inappropriate? Maybe. Demonstrative of the relationship that Epstein had with Donald Trump, with Woody Allen, with Alan Dershowitz, with Bill Clinton, with I think Tim Cook was in one of the pictures. Whatever. It shows what it shows. Bunch of people dressed up generally in suits or in sports gear, sitting around all together. So it demonstratively shows that there's a relationship, but it doesn't show the criminality. Why do you think has the push for full transparency reach this fever pitch right now? Is it to corroborate? Is it to to validate? What's your position on that?
It's a good question, because even an incredible reporter from the Miami Herald, who kind of got this ball rolling, Julie K. Smith stated she was surprised that we are as far as we are today. Mm-hmm. So I think it's sort of the totality of everything. I think that, again, part of this is they brought it upon themselves on the right, because Donald Trump and others talked about getting to the bottom of Jeffrey Epstein during the campaign. And then, as soon as they were sworn in early January, they were talking about releasing all these files. Yep. But the fact is that, there was the sweetheart deal that Jeffrey Epstein died on Donald Trump's watch, no matter what happened. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist. It's just like you can't blame Joe Biden for Jeffrey Epstein's death. The other thing is that I wasn't a fan of Merrick Garland, but this was in fact an active investigation that was still ongoing in early January of this year when Donald Trump took office. So this BS talking point of why did the Democrats not release X, Y, and Z? Well, we had a DOJ that was operating the way that it was supposed to, at least on this. I feel like they could have been a little harder and played a little harder.
They could have easily moved faster. Four years. Merrick Garland was absolutely the worst pick that Joe Biden could have had for an attorney general.
I agree.
Or me or anybody else would have had this thing 100%. We would have had this thing locked and loaded, not 4 years. If you could build a whole city in 4 years.
I agree. If you compare the two things, though, right? Donald Trump is terrified of all this coming out. I don't think Joe Biden and Merrick Garland were spending their time trying to protect Donald Trump. So the reality is they're not releasing this. What is Donald Trump trying to do? Protect Bill Clinton and Bill Gates? Right. I don't care who's in it. Bring it out. But I do think that they brought a lot of this upon themselves. And it seems to be the one topic where Donald suddenly hates conspiracy theories. So
by the way, my mistake. You're right. It was Bill Gates, not Cook. My mistake, not Tim Cook. So please, folks.
Sorry, Mr. Cook.
Right, I apologize.
I don't know where this is going to go, but I just the reality is like what are they so scared of? It's just why are we putting millions of dollars into paying overtime to have all the? I understand protecting victims not being re-victimized, all that kind of stuff, but based on the FOIAs that Jason Leopold and others have released recently, it's very clear there was a list, because they're using the list of clients to marry them up with photos and metadata to see if there's any other third parties that are involved that they should be aware of. So it's self-admitted in these emails.
So Adam, final question. If the entire Epstein file is released, the names, the timelines, the connections, wishful thinking, but if the entire file is released, you think this finally forces accountability, or do you think that we've reached a moment where even the truth struggles to break through this tribal loyalty?
Look, you have to wonder, and I think again there is that divide in the Republican Party. It's not just the Candace Owens of the world. You saw it with the Speaker of the House and the Republican leader of the Senate, Thune, when this vote took place. The Epstein piece under Massey and Khanna passed the House with only one Republican voting against it. It went to the Senate. And I don't think Mike Johnson, as we saw in that video, had any anticipation after spending day after day saying this isn't legal, all this kind of stuff, that was going to come out of the Senate as quickly as it did. So when we talk about, Senator Kennedy, maybe this is the line in the sand for him. I do also think that it comes a point where Republicans who have, masqueraded as the party of family values and the American flag are not going to want to get caught up in truly being the pedophile protectors, which at this point, that's what they've been doing. And I think that, we'll see what happens, but that might be the line in the sand here.
Yeah. Look, let's just hope that we get to see justice for all of these young women who have endured and continued to endure so much. Adam Parkhomenko, thank you, my brother.
Thanks,
always good to see you.
You too.
Definitely going to have you back. So much going on and so much to talk about.
Thanks, my friend.
Be well.